and welcome to a brand new video. Today we have a new mysterious case, one of the most requested in my channel history, and I'm determined to film it right now. I think it's time, and I've already gotten used to my videos getting demonetized, so I wouldn't mind in this occasion. But today we're gonna talk about the ABC Daycare Center case. I think it's important to talk about this case because everything that happened sometime later and on that moment. So anyway, we'll get to know more about it. But before we begin, don't forget to follow me on all my social media. You know I have a billion social media accounts. And the most important thing is to subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a new video. But anyways, without anything else to say, let's begin. The mysterious case of the ABC Daycare Center. Well, regarding this, I'm not going to give you like a biography or a specific person or anything, but we're going to dive straight away into the events that happened because more than anything, this was an event, something that happened, and not something related to a specific person. It happened on June 5th, 2009 in Hermosillo, Sonora, Mexico. What was the ABC Daycare Center there? The ABC Daycare Center was, as its names indicate, a daycare center like a kindergarten. It was an establishment that was part of what supposedly was civil property, but it was also acquired by a private organization. It was located in the Greek neighborhood of the city in Hermosillo, as I've mentioned. This building where the daycare center was, it was mostly a warehouse, and it shared space with an archives warehouse of the Sinaloa's Finance and Government Department too. It kept all those papers and things related to vehicles' license plates. That office or archives warehouse was moved there in 2002, which was after the daycare center was already there. The employees from the neighboring warehouse, namely the archives, said they work normally from 8 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. They shut down all the systems according to them, the air conditioning and well, everything. And around 3 p.m. the children were already napping before leaving the daycare center, where their parents would pick them up later. However, in the archives warehouse, a cooling system overheated, which caused a terrible fire that was fueled by approximately 5 tons of archives. That was an enormous fire because of all the paper and, well, all the papers, and it was going to spread very easily. The fire obviously consumed all the archives warehouse and expanded to the ABC Daycare Center. There were around 176 children sleeping and around 50 employees. In the daycare center, there were evidently some toxic agents in what they use for the kids or because of the materials building was made of. The ceilings were false ceilings, and there was a very serious problem with the doors and the emergency exits because they opened to the inside towards you, not the outside. Evidently, there weren't fire extinguishers either. There was nothing to be activated in case of a fire, both there and in the archives warehouse. So that obviously caused the fire to expand even quicker and couldn't be controlled. People from the neighboring buildings from the nearby companies started getting to that place quickly to help get the children out, to try and save as many lives as they could. And obviously the police, the firefighters, and the paramedics arrived later, but that was a very complicated situation. On the one hand, as I've told you, it was very hard for the children, the teachers, and a lot of people to get out because they weren't effective exits. Also, the smoke started pushing the doors, preventing them from being opened. So what people did in their rush to help was climb some walls and cars to be able to enter the place. Then the firefighters created a hole in the wall, which was the one that helped a lot of people get in and save the children. Sadly, they couldn't save everyone. 49 children died. Among them, there were 24 girls and 25 boys. It was a horrible tragedy. There were around 75 children hurt, and it was very, very tragic. I've watched several documentaries about the events, and I saw the way in which people tried to save these lives. Sometimes you couldn't see anything, and they stepped on the children without realizing. Most of them died not because of the burns they got, although some got burned very badly, but most of them died asphyxiated. The smoke was really dense, and the children were obviously napping in that moment the fire started. So they began inhaling all that smoke, and that's how most of the victims died. And let's say that here's when a lot of not so much theories, because this was a proven fact. Until now, it has been said that it was accidental. But failures in the government and failures in the security of the governmental entities that are specifically in charge of those daycares appeared. And those make this become one of the worst tragedies that had happened in Mexico and in the city of Hermosillo. There was a huge fight from the parents and all the victims, and even the ones that weren't victims, against the government. And they sued Sonora's ex-governor called Eduardo Burrs, who back then was in charge. Well, he was Hermosillo's governor too. He was accused of lack of action and negligence because he really wasn't the most present and useful person when that accident happened. A lot of irregularities were discovered in that daycare center, which were the ones they denounced for how it was possible. If there are security checks supposedly, how could they allow those things happen in that place? The lack of emergency exits, they weren't doors especially adapted for this type of emergencies. There was a lack of apt personnel to go and attend the emergency. There were obviously defects in the smoke detectors, and there were no fire extinguishers. The covering of the ceiling, which is the most absurd of it all, was made using flammable material. I mean, most of the burns, or almost all the children and victims' burns, were caused because drops of that flammable material fell on them and burned them completely. And there are obviously certain consequences because of that. There were some people from the government and from the other departments, especially, who were dismissed because of what happened. Several employees from the IMSS were accused, among those Carla Rushin, who was precisely the daycare center's coordinator, and Sergio Antonio Salazar, who was the director of finance. They were dismissed and later on processed for not being able to rigorously regulate all these daycare centers. There were some private partners, owners of that daycare center, but oddly enough, all of them were released on bail in 2010. Just one of them remained in jail preventively, but the rest were quickly released. And that's how the parents and the victims of this horrible accident promoted a law called the Law of June 5th, which is a law that seeks to increase the security measures, the civil protection, the authorities, and the vigilance of those kind of events. This was approved at last in October 2011 after a long fight, for they pushed for almost 3 years for that to be sanctioned. But other things happened that allowed people realize some things as the day passed. This happened on June 5th, 2009. The next day, June 6th, the president back then, Felipe Calderón, visited the place, some of the victims in the hospitals, and promised to do justice regarding all of that. On that occasion, he said this: "Our thoughts, our actions, and our prayers are with the families that are living this horrible situation today. As a Mexican, as a parent, as president of this republic, I'm truly saddened and worried from the moment I've heard about this tragedy." Then, on July 18, a month after the tragedy, the people I mentioned were dismissed. Among these were the daycare center's coordinator and the finance director. On August 5th, 2009, a much more formal investigation regarding the events started, asked by, obviously, for the victims. The investigation revealed an appalling result, but that it was also obvious after a tragedy like that happened, which was that there was a huge disorganization not only in that daycare center, but in absolutely every single one in Hermosillo and in Mexico, regarding the building contracts and the approvals of these spaces. What does this mean? A lot of times the proper regulations weren't applied and they gave contracts to companies that didn't do anything, didn't go and check if the places were indeed apt for those kind of uses. They adjudged contracts corruptly, simply giving them a lot of money when they didn't do anything regarding the companies. Or they just say like, yes, you're apt for being a daycare center, when actually they didn't even have emergency exits. On January 5, 2010, they managed to find uncontestable proof that there were electrical malfunctions and those caused the fire. But something interesting was also found, which is that they say there was probably certain human manipulation that could have generated an intentional fire through some of those warehouse boxes. Many people say that inside those boxes of the archives there was important information, because they were property of the Finance and Government Department of Sinaloa. And there's a theory that talks about those files and that fire is starting because someone tried to burn those files. Those files had evidence that proved how high the country's external debt was in that moment, and the exact amount couldn't be known, for it would be a serious matter. So according to what it is said, that was the reason behind the fire. Someone provoked it. On May 5, 2010, after the investigations conclude, according to what it is said, more employees were implicated as culprits, and the daycare center owners were also found guilty. Until then, they hadn't appeared, they hadn't said a word until they were possessed, but as I told you, they were also freed. On June 3, 2010, 2 days before the anniversary of the tragedy, they decreed that date as a national grieving day due to the tragedy and honor the victims. And the sad thing is that until now, there aren't culprits. I mean, the government hasn't given an answer regarding what happened or who is going to really pay for all of that. Several people who were allegedly involved were detained, but all of them eventually got out of prison, and it's very sad because it's been 10 years. This year is the 10th anniversary of the Daycare Center tragedy, and everything has become blurred. People have stopped paying attention. It's like they simply accept it as an accident where there are many culprits, where there should be many people sentenced not for the events themselves or the conspiracy theories, but for the fact that the daycare center wasn't adapted for these kind of odd things. I saw a map and there was also a petrol station crossing the street. And also I find it incredible to have a daycare center inside a warehouse, which is more like an industrial warehouse than a building adapter for teaching kids. And in the end, the only one dismissed were the daycare center's coordinator, the finance director, and other people, among those the state's representative of the IMSS, Arturo Leiva. The chief financial delegate called Emilio Martinez, the coordinator delegate of the IMSS and the daycare centers, Noemi Lopez, and National Daycare Centers coordinator of Hermosillo, Delia Irene Botello. The only one that ended up in jail was the National Daycare Center's coordinator, because the ABC Daycare Center was in her jurisdiction. However, she was freed in 2014. There wasn't enough evidence and the due process wasn't followed. As I told you, the parents fought for the owners of the daycare center to be put in jail, but nothing happened. They realized that many of the implicated people or that had to face justice were related or had, on one way or the other, connections to people in high places. There's even someone who was connected to the First Lady. Also, in August 2015, there was a trial and there was an important sentence for the people or the women that were working as employees in the time of the daycare center. Many of them went out without helping the children. They thought of their lives first and left the children trapped there. They tried to charge them with homicide for abandoning the children, but nothing happened there either, and I don't know what to think about that. Obviously, one thing's first of our own lives. I do think they were in charge of the children and they abandoned them, but it's a process and a very complicated ethical discussion. There were women who felt guilty about that. One of them lost her own children there because she was studying in that daycare. In the beginning, there were 32 people processed, 10 were dismissed, and 22 were sentenced to 20 to 29 years inside the prison. including the department chief of daycare centers, including the legal representative of the daycare center, the secretary of the daycare centers council, the chief of civil protection, and even some firefighters. Among those chiefs or people in high ranks in the fire department given to poor effectiveness. The events are still being investigated and it has become a really slow process. There are some documents. The parents also erect an anti-monument in which they installed 25 pairs of shoes made with bronze and in the kids' actual sizes, representing the ones that lost their lives, in front of the Mexican Social Security Institute. This was their way of protesting because absolutely anything has been clear about these events. The only good thing was the creating of the law of June 5th, which I told you about, and that includes the National Grieving Day to honor all of this. After 10 years of the events, there was a vigil outside of the daycare center warehouse, and many people bought white handkerchiefs, candles, some shoes, and a small altar was created to honor the 49 dead kids of the tragedy that happened that day. I only hope someone gives an answer soon, that people have real justice regarding these events and for the causes and everything that led that daycare center to be there and not someplace else to be investigated. My condolences if any of the families watches this video. I really think this was a tragic event. I must confess I cried a lot watching the documentaries. I was really shocked. I think that if you ask me, until now I believe this is one of the cases that have impacted me the most. It's scary how those powers are handled and I don't know the corruption in these types of situations. But anyway, I leave the ABC Daycare Center case here. You know that if you like it a lot, please leave the thumbs up, comment what other cases you like me to make. Don't forget to follow me on all my social media. You know I have a billion social media accounts. Subscribe to this channel and activate the notification bell so it lets you know when I upload a video. Thank you so much for watching me. Don't forget to follow your dreams and I'll see you on the next one. Bye!